Solomon director Steven Soderbergh.
Yeah!
Gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. Congratulations on a great movie. I want to start with Ed, because the stories that the two of you were grabbing a drink, Steven suggests an idea, and that you had for a while this idea, I'm trying to think how you put it, about an older artist who had given up. This is this stray thought that had been bouncing around in your head. I was curious, did you ever, before talking to Steven about this, had you ever written something, even treatments about this idea, or was it just literally just sort of sitting in your head for years?
I had had a few very close, both creative and personal relationships with some comedians, writers, a filmmaker, a director, and an illustrator, actually. And I'd been wanting to tell a story about that relationship. I had not done any work on it. In fact, there was one who was an actor who had sort of quit and gone off and done other things. I had had a fantasy that one day I would write something that would bring this person back into their sense of purpose, because I had really cared about them at the time. And that, I just hadn't known how and when to write it. And I had a voice in my head for the character. So when Steven brings this idea up, and he says, I want to do this small film relationship, older artist, younger artist, contained space, some subterfuge. Perhaps she enters his life as an assistant, let's say, and we started talking about it just over a drink. I thought, I could feel myself falling into it and going, oh my God, I think I know what this is. And then we started elaborating on the idea, talking about this notion of the inheritance and the hidden, the buried paintings, and we started to laugh about it. And I went home to my wife, and I said, I think, we never said, do you want to write this? We never said, should we work on it? It never came up. I went home and said, I think I'm writing this movie for Steven. Yeah.
And I'm assuming, Steven, for you, that was, without even being said, it was understood that Ed was going to sort of take a crack at this after you'd had the conversation?
Actually, yeah, I never knew this. What was your thoughts after that?
Well, I pitched it to somebody else, like later. No, first of all, thanks for sharing your Sunday with us.
Oh,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's LA, you have lots of options. But no, it was literally a one sentence idea, and I think in my conception at that moment, it was more Tom Ripley, Patricia Highsmith, a little darker, not as deep, not as emotional. I think didn't, in my mind, necessarily contain all of this sort of debate and back and forth that it ended up having. So it was just by chance that this simple idea turned out to be a container for all this stuff you built up, over the decades, and it all came pouring out. And you went and wrote it on spec, and it all happened pretty quickly, which is usually a good sign. We did, as you may have heard, we did that thing that you're not supposed to do, which is I told Ed, I want you to write it with Ian and Michaela in mind. I didn't know either of them. It's helpful to have a target. The danger here was I really couldn't imagine anybody else. So we got lucky.
But there were of course the 950 other 87-year-old actors available that could carry a role like that.
Out of curiosity, so when Steven says, I'm thinking Ian, I'm thinking Michaela, do you prefer as a writer? Because obviously the two of you worked before, but you've also done projects with other folks. Do you like thinking of an actor, even if you don't think you'd ever be able to get them? Do you write towards a specific actor in mind? I guess I'm curious how different this was to be told, this actor and this actor, these are the people I would love to have in this movie. They have to be in this.
There's always a voice. It could be a specific person, it could be a made-up individual, but having an aspirational touch point, I like it, and it doesn't mean I'm trying to imagine what I imagine Ian McKellen would do, because I'm very used to having a certain person in mind, and then an entirely different, very different type of person might end up being cast in that role, and it's equally exciting to see what they bring. The voice I was writing for, even though we were thinking of Ian, was still that voice. And it's not Ian's voice specifically, but as soon as Ian inhabited the role, let's say, as soon as I started writing it and knowing the world that Steve and I had been talking about, and then as Steve and I were talking about the idea as we were developing it, it evolved. And yes, it probably tipped more toward what I imagined Ian to be, but he's also not an actor, he's not a quote movie star who has one personality, and one attitude. He's a shapeshifter. He's a brilliant actor who inhabits so many different characters so impeccably. So I think if it was, trying to think of an actor who's more specific, maybe it would have been narrowing, but it didn't feel that way.
I'm also just so curious about this idea of deciding the artistic temperament of the artist, the style that they work in specifically. If I understand correctly, Ed, your mother is an artist. In terms of the conversation the two of you had about just what kind of artist is Julian? I don't mean, not his history, but just what style he works in. How did that develop?
Originally, he was going to be a more conceptual artist, but when we spoke about it, it quickly moved in, not quickly, but it evolved into more of a painter. And part of the reason was that when you're making a film and conceptual art becomes the sort of the milieu, it tends to veer toward two things: satire. Someone said, when people want to do a movie to skewer the art world, they make it about contemporary conceptual art. But also it raises a question, which is, was he really an artist or just a kind of conceptual character? So it started to move more toward painter. And I remember a conversation you and I were having where Steven, we were talking about the line and his ability to hold the line and draw, and we began to realize that he needed to really have had unquestionable talent. It makes it sadder to give that up, because if he had been questioning whether or not he's a real artist at the beginning, he's not really giving up anything. He's not giving up a drive and a purpose and a sense of fulfillment.
Steven, to the point that you made before about your initial idea and then the two of you talk, and you said that it became more emotional. When this movie premiered in Toronto and ever since, the reviews have been ecstatic. But one of the things I think is really interesting is they often talk about this feels like a slightly more emotional film from Soderbergh in terms of recent film. And I was curious for you if that's how you feel about the Christophers, in terms of it being maybe more emotional or different in that way than maybe some of the recent films that you have done. Is that your perception of this film?
I think more in terms of what it wants to be. And that's what it wanted to be.
Yeah.
And so that's good, that's fine. It's part of the process. It's a part of the process I enjoy, which is sort of listening to it and chasing it But I was, in thinking about like what the idea, that original idea, what was underneath that wasn't part of the setup, was I'm really interested in how we imbue people who make beautiful things with certain characteristics, and a sort of special quality. When we're compelled by something or moved by it, we ascribe qualities to the person that made it that could be true and could not be true.
Yeah.
And I was really interested in that idea, which is expressed through Laurie's entry into Julian's life. But I've read a lot of biographies of artists and some autobiographies, and I'm just always interested in this projection that takes place. I do it all the time, which is why I avoid meeting my heroes. Not that they're all potentially terrible, they're probably not, but it's tricky, you know, and like a lot of people, I'm not sure that I want that sort of, you know, idea of them to be altered, not even ruined, just altered. You know, in my mind, my relationship with, and we do it with athletes too, I think it's with anybody that we just think is really, really good at something. And part of me feels like I'd rather just have it the way it is in my head. So I feel terrible for people who run into me somewhere. You're like, wow, I used to like his films. And it's true, like we are the work to a large extent. If I think it's absolutely fair to look at a filmmaker's work and make certain assumptions about their personality. You spend time as a director on the things that you like, and it is absolutely fair if you have a filmmaker's body of work that, let's say, contains a lot of violent material, they're into it. You know what I mean? That stuff takes time, and I don't spend time on things that I'm not sort of passionate about or compelled by. So all of these ideas were just interesting to me. This projection.
Because when I think about you as a filmmaker, as an artist, it seems like you, consciously or not, have done the thing that Julian did not do. And it seems like in some ways he got stuck in ruts and became bitter and became cynical. I guess I'm wondering, obviously Ed writes the script, the two of you work on it together. Do you look at Julian as sort of a cautionary tale in terms of artists can go in all different directions and lots of things can happen to people along the way, but that's not what I want to end up becoming? I'm curious for you, Steven, if that's part of the process or thinking about the character.
Sure, yeah. I mean, the thing that gives you the night sweats, we've talked about this, is what I refer to as the slackening.
Yeah.
And it's the perception, whether it's on the part of the public or from your perspective, that over time, near the latter part of the career, that the work just isn't as interesting or vital or current as it once was. That is just terrifying. And there are strategies, I think, for if not avoiding it entirely, at least mitigating it a little bit. And it's how you work. There's a way through, I think, engaging in a certain process, which is something you can control and actually has nothing to do with your talent or your taste. It's just strictly a method of working that allows for a certain level of engagement with the people that are making the thing with you, and a process of stress testing creatively, constantly throughout, having a running conversation with people sort of in the brain trust about is this working? Like, how are we doing? If it's not working, why isn't it working? What do we need to do to fix this? To at least be that, to engage in some sort of rigorous, analysis in real time, I think at least gives you a shot at making something that on its own terms will feel unified. And what the audience wants to know when they're looking at something moment to moment, why are you showing me this? Why am I looking at this? And you have to keep answering that question. And despite the fact that this is a very contained film, it's actually in narrative and character terms very active. Like, something is always happening. Each scene, there's a new thing that makes you kind of rethink what you saw. And that's a testament, I think, to Ed's pure sense of craft, of like, things need to keep happening. And I feel the same. And so those are conversations we're having a lot. In post-production, there was this whole other narrative thread that got cut. There was a sort of framing device around the legal battle over the paintings. And we showed it, we had a couple friends and family screenings, and it became glaringly obvious that wasn't necessary.
Well, because both of you are pros and both of you have worked at what you do for a long time. And I wonder, is there still that moment where you think, but boy, I really love that framing? Or have both of you reached a point in your career where it's like, if it doesn't work, get rid of it. Don't be precious about it, just get rid of it.
Absolutely. On Contagion, which went through a very kind of radical reinvention in the edit room that involved some significant reshoots, I threw out 45 minutes of edited material because it had to go. The movie didn't work, and a friend of ours, Scott Frank, saw the movie, and we were at a phase in our relationship where it was really good timing for him to have an opportunity to trash me, and he took it. But what he did was really helpful. He literally goes, "There's so many things wrong here, I don't know where to start. But why don't you do this experiment? Why don't you spend a day doing a 90-minute cut of this?" Because it was like 2:20 at that point. Just to see what the non-submersible units of narrative are for this movie. And I did that, and out of that emerged a structure that with strategic reshoots was what you saw. So I'm always ready to throw the pizza up in the air, but I also try to be decisive, as much as I can. But the thing that keeps it exciting is no matter what you learn, and I try to make notes about these things and have my bucket of solves when I see a problem in front of me. But every project's different, and everything you may have learned up to this point may not be enough for this one.
Is that comforting in a way to know that problem will always happen each time, that you have these solves and you have this experience? Is there a comfort going, I'm here again, this was always gonna happen, I knew it was gonna happen, or is it frustrating every single damn time?
I'm glad that it's always a surprise. Like, that keeps it exciting, it keeps it fresh. But there are days when you're sitting there and it's just not alive or something's not happening, and then you get a little frustrated and you gotta count to 10. If I get into a really bad situation, I send everybody away so that I can think and pretend there's no clock, there's no money involved. What's wrong? Why am I bumping on this thing that we're trying to do? And it's the last time it happened, I remember Greg Jacobs, who I work with a lot, knows my body language and has seen this before. And the last time this happened, he could see that I was going into that place of not being happy with what I was proposing. And I looked over at him and he goes, "Too early for lunch." Because that's usually my first move. It's like, let's go to lunch and send everybody away. And he just went, "It's too early." And so, I had to just wait and figure it out, and eventually figured it out.
For me, the thing that experience has given me is the realization and the confidence, I guess, to understand that all my experience doesn't matter on this one. And that the next one is gonna have its own problems, and the job is not to apply what I learned from the last one to this, but to apply the faith that this one's rules are different than last one's rules, and my new job is to understand what this one's rules are and start to apply it to that one. Every project teaches you 1, 2, 3, 1,000 new tricks, quote unquote, new skills, new arrows for your quiver. And every project not just wants something different for itself, but sometimes wants something different for itself in the middle of the project. And it's like, we've talked about, it's like having a child. You have a child, you think about having a child, you're gonna have a son. My first child was a son. He's going to be like this, I bet. I can't wait to teach him how to throw a ball, whatever it is. And then they're born, and then it's like, oh, this is who they are. They're very different, and they continue to evolve. And my job as a parent is not to force him into what I thought he was going to be, but rather understand what this person is trying to become inside of themselves.
If I can ask a favor of the audience, we actually have to leave right now, so if you wouldn't mind just staying in your seats as we leave. But I want to thank you all. I want to thank you all so much for being here. And Steven and Ed, thank you so much.